Mr. Vitter. Mr. Vitter, no. Mrs. Gillibrand. Mrs. Gillibrand, aye. Mr. Cardin. Mr. Cardin, aye. Mr. McCain. Mr. McCain, no. Mr. Franken. Mr. Franken, aye. Mr. Blumenthal. Mr. Blumenthal, aye. Mr. Inouye. Mr. Inouye, aye. Mr. Sessions. Mr. Sessions, no. Mr. Whitehouse. Mr. Whitehouse, aye. Mr. Webb. Mr. Webb, aye. Mrs. Shaheen. Mrs. Shaheen, aye. Mr. McConnell. Mr. McConnell, no. Mr. Menendez. Mr. Menendez, aye. Mrs. Hagan. Mrs. Hagan, aye. Mr. Casey. Mr. Casey, aye. Mr. Alexander. Mr. Alexander, no. Mr. Akaka. Mr. Akaka, aye. Mr. Enzi. Mr. Enzi, no. Mr. Grassley, no. Mr. Harkin. Mr. Harkin, aye. Mrs. Murray. Mrs. Murray, aye. Mrs. McCaskill. Mrs. McCaskill, aye. Mr. Carey. Mr. Carey, aye. Mr. Kirk, no. Mr. Udall. Mr. Udall of New Mexico, aye. Mr. Hatch. Mr. Hatch, no. They took away the, yeah. Mr. Shelby. Mr. Shelby, aye. Mr. Baucus. Mr. Baucus, aye. Mr. Burr. Mr. Burr, no. Mr. Durbin. Mr. Durbin, aye. Mr. Carper. Mr. Carper, aye. Mr. Lieberman. Mr. Lieberman, no. Ms. Snow. Ms. Snow, aye. Mr. Levin. Mr. Levin, aye. Mr. Nelson. Mr. Nelson of Nebraska, aye. Mr. Portman. Mr. Portman, no. Mr. Soon. Mr. Soon, no. Mrs. Boxer. Mrs. Boxer, aye. Mr. Begich, aye. Mr. Udall. Mr. Udall of Colorado, aye. Mr. Hoven. Mr. Hoven, no. Ms. Murkowski, no. Mr. Conrad. Mr. Conrad, aye. Mr. Merkley. Mr. Merkley, aye. Mr. Moran. Mr. Moran, no. Mr. Reed. Mr. Reed of Nevada, aye. Almost. Mr. Cornyn. Mr. Cornyn, no. Mr. Bennett. Mr. Bennett, aye. Mr. Warner, no. Mrs. Feinstein. Mrs. Feinstein, aye.
Are there any senators in the chamber who have not yet voted who wish to change their vote? If not, on this vote, the yeas are 55, the nays are 44. Under the previous order requiring 60 votes for the adoption of this amendment, the amendment is not agreed to. Under the previous order, there are now 2 minutes equally divided prior to a vote in relation to amendment number 874 as modified to be offered by the senator from Ohio, Mr. Brown. Senator from Ohio.
Thank you, Mr. President. I call up Amendment 874 as modified.
The Senate will be in order, please. Clerk will report.
The Senator from Ohio, Mr. Brown, proposes amendment number 874 as modified to amendment number 738.
President, I ask consent that further reading of the amendment be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. Housing discrimination not only violates our laws, it's a barrier to economic mobility. This amendment would put FIP funding on equal footing with the House legislation. It's about maintaining level funding so that fair housing organizations won't be forced to lay off hundreds of employees across the country. The amendment's effective. Fair housing organizations investigated 65% of the nation's complaints, nearly twice as many as all government agencies combined. It's efficient. It saves money by streamlining the claims investigations process. My amendment's fully paid for, transferring funds from HUD's Working Capital Fund. I want to thank Senator Murray, Chair of the subcommittee, Senator Collins, Ranking Member, for their support, and the presiding officer also for co-sponsoring this important amendment. I yield the floor. Thank you, Mr. President.
Who yields time in opposition?
I would yield back the time.
If there is no further debate, all those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The amendment is agreed to. Under the previous order, there are now 2 minutes equally divided prior to a vote in relation to amendment number 815 as modified, offered by the senator from Kansas, Mr. Moran. Who yields time?
Then we yield back time.
Okay. Without objection? If there is no further debate, all those in favor say aye.
Mr. President.
Senator from Kansas.
Mr. President, before yielding back our time,
Senate will be in order.
Mr. President, the pending business before the Senate is an amendment that I offered yesterday. It's Moran number 815. It has been agreed to that it will be accepted on voice vote, and I appreciate the leadership of Chairman Cole and Ranking Member Blunt, and I yield back the Republicans' time.
If there's no further debate, all those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The amendment is agreed to. Under the previous order, there are now 2 minutes equally divided prior to a vote in relation to amendment number 860, offered by the senator from Iowa, Mr. Grassley.
Mr. President,
Senator from Iowa.
this is a good government amendment, and it goes after the Justice Department grant management program because the Inspector General has had grant management at the top of 10 major management challenges.
The Senate will be in order. Senator has a right to be heard. Senator
Can I start over again then?
Sure.
Anyway, the Inspector General says that management of grants at the Justice Department is abominable. And so this amendment is trying to take care of what the Inspector General has said needs to be done for a long period of time. Grant recipients would be held to basic principles of accountability. And there's only a handful of grants audited each year, but out of that handful, 25% talk about mismanagement, fraud, and things of that nature. A vote against my amendment would be a vote to allow fraud, waste, and abuse of taxpayers-funded grant program. A vote against my amendment would allow nonprofit charities to continue to hold money offshore bank account for tax purposes, you know, and still receive federal grants. And I got a letter in my office that justifies $54 million offshore. So I hope that you'll vote for this good government amendment. Thank you.
President, can we have order?
Senate will be in order.
Mr. President, I've worked with my good friend from Iowa on accountability measures and will continue to, but not for this amendment. This is a one-size-fits-all. There's a reason the National District Attorneys Association, the reason the National Association of Police Organization oppose it. This would make it impossible for small rural communities to get bulletproof vests under the Leahy-Campbell Bulletproof Vest program. This would make it impossible for some of the small departments to have the money to pay for rape kits. They'd have to tell the rape victim, sorry, we can't go after the person who raped you, even though they might come back, because we don't have the money. We don't have the money to test this rape kit. This is a one-size-fits-all that is going to hurt law enforcement. It is going to hurt victims. We will pay the price of the person we lock up, but we won't do anything to help the victim. I oppose it.
Supported by the National Taxpayers Union.
I stand with the prosecutors and the police who oppose it.
All time has expired. The question is on Grassley Amendment number 860. All right. Is there a sufficient second? There appears to be. Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka. Mr. Alexander. Ms. Ayotte. Mr. Barrasso. Mr. Balkus. Mr. Beckidge. Mr. Bennett. Mr. Bingaman. Mr. Blumenthal. Mr. Blunt. Mr. Bozeman. Mrs. Boxer. Mr. Brown of Massachusetts. Mr. Brown of Ohio. Mr. Burr. Read. Ms. Cantwell. Mr. Cardin. Mr. Carper. Mr. Casey. Mr. Chambliss. Mr. Coates. Mr. Coburn. Mr. Cochran. Ms. Collins. Mr. Conrad. Mr. Coons. Mr. Corker. Mr. Cornyn. Mr. Crapo. Please. Mr. Dement. Mr. Durbin. Mr. Enzi. Mrs. Feinstein. Mr. Franken. Mrs. Gillibrand. Mr. Graham. Mr. Grassley. Mrs. Hagan. Mr. Harkin. Mr. Hatch. Mr. Heller. Mr. Hoven. Mrs. Hutchison. Mr. Inhofe. Mr. Inouye. Mr. Isaacson. Mr. Johans. Mr. Johnson of Wisconsin. Mr. Johnson of South Dakota. You are now.
Thank you.
Sanders, no, please. Okay.
Mr. Carey, Mr. Kirk, Ms. Klobuchar, Mr. Cole, Mr. Kyle, Ms. Landrieu, Mr. Lautenberg, Mr. Leahy, Mr. Lee, Mr. Levin, Mr. Lieberman, Mr. Lugar, Mr. Manchin, Mr. McCain, Mrs. McCaskill, Mr. McConnell, Mr. Menendez, Mr. Merkley, Ms. Mikulski, Mr. Moran, Ms. Murkowski, Mrs. Murray, Mr. Nelson, Nebraska, Mr. Nelson of Florida, Mr. Paul, Mr. Portman, Mr. Pryor, Mr. Reed of Rhode Island, Mr. Reed of Nevada, Mr. Risch, Mr. Roberts, Mr. Rockefeller, Mr. Rubio, Mr. Sanders, Mr. Schumer, Mr. Sessions, Mrs. Shaheen, Mr. Shelby, Ms. Snow, Ms. Stabenow, Mr. Tester, Mr. Thune, Mr. Toomey, Mr. Udall of Colorado, Mr. Udall of New Mexico, Mr. Vitter, Mr. Warner, Mr. Webb, Mr. Whitehouse, Mr. Wicker, Mr. Wyden. Senators voting in the affirmative: Alexander, Barrasso, Blunt, Bozeman, Burr, Chambliss, Coates, Coburn, Cochran, Collins, Corker, Cornyn, DeMint, Enzi, Graham, Grassley, Hatch, Heller, Inhofe, Isaacson, Johans, Johnson of Wisconsin, Kirk, Kyle, Lee, Lugar, Manchin, McCain, Paul, Roberts, Rubio, Sessions, Shelby, Snow, Thune, Toomey, Vitter, and Wicker. Mr. Casey. Thank you. Mr. McConnell, aye. Senators voting in the negative: Akaka, Baucus, Beckich, Bennett, Bingaman, Blumenthal, Boxer, Brown of Massachusetts, Brown of Ohio, Cantwell, Cardin, Carper, Casey, Conrad, Coons, Durbin, Feinstein, Franken, Gillibrand, Hagan, Harkin, Inouye, Johnson of South Dakota, Kerry, Klobuchar, Cole, Landrieu, Leahy, Levin, McCaskill, Menendez, Merkley, Mikulski, Murray, Nelson, Nebraska, Nelson of Florida, Reed of Rhode Island, Reed of Nevada, Rockefeller, Sanders, Schumer, Shaheen, Stabenow, Tester, Udall of Colorado, Udall of New Mexico, Warner, Webb, Whitehouse, and Wyden. Mrs. Hutchison, aye. Mr. Hoven, aye. Mr. Moran, aye. Mr. Pryor, no. Ms. Ayotte, aye. Mr. Lieberman, no. Mr. Lautenberg, no. Ms. Murkowski, no. Mr. Portman, aye. No. Mr. Risch, aye. Mr. Crapo, aye. Now, are we still saying it? I can't remember. Are we saying it? We are. What is it that we're no longer doing? Which one?
Are there any senators who have not yet voted or wish to change their vote? If not, on this vote, the yeas are 46, the nays are 54. Under the previous order requiring 60 votes for the adoption of this amendment, the amendment is not agreed to.
Mr. President,
Senator from Oklahoma.
I would ask you unanimous consent.
Senate will be in order. Senator from Oklahoma.
I would ask unanimous consent to call up the following amendments, displacing the amendment that is present in block, but considering each one of them individually. That would be amendment number 793, 794, 795, 796, 797, 798, 799, 800, and 801. This one's been taken out. I'd make an exception. 798 has been done, which would eliminate that. And 801 and 833.
Object. For the moment, I object.
Will the senator do his list again, please?
Amendments number 794 through 797, Amendment 799 and 801, and Amendment 833.
Without objection, the amendments are pending en bloc.
Thank you, and I yield.
Senator from Michigan.
Mr. President, I am going to speak now against the pending amendment of Senator Ayotte, which would prohibit the prosecution of terrorists in federal courts. We need all available tools against terrorists.
Okay, I'm just going to waive it. Okay. Just grab a couple of them.
Senate will be in order. Senator from Michigan.
Mr. President, we need all available tools against terrorists, including the possibility of prosecution in federal courts or before military commissions. And there's no doubt that we've made use of military commissions in the course of previous wars, but we have never enacted legislation closing the federal courts to the prosecution of our enemies. We have always left it up to the executive branch to determine which tool best fits an individual case. Indeed, both the Bush administration and the Obama administration have repeatedly used the federal courts to bring terrorists to justice. For example, the Bush administration successfully used the federal courts to prosecute Richard Reed, the so-called shoe bomber, in October of 2002. The Bush administration used the federal courts to successfully prosecute Ahmed Omar Abu, who was convicted and sentenced to 30 years in 2005. The Bush administration used the federal courts to prosecute and sentence Zacharias Moussaoui, the so-called 20th hijacker, convicted in 2006, sentenced to life in prison for his role in the 9/11 attacks. The Obama administration has successfully used the federal courts when they prosecuted Najibullah Zazi in 2009 for his role in the New York subway bombing plot, when they prosecuted Faisal Shahzad in 2010 in connection with the Times Square bombing, when they prosecuted Umar Farouk Abdul Muttalib, the so-called underwear bomber, in 2011 in connection with the attempted Christmas Day bombing in Detroit. If the Ayotte Amendment had been law, these successful court prosecutions would have been thrown into doubt. In fact, prosecution might not have been possible in any forum, because if a court determined that a military commission lacked jurisdiction, and if the Ayotte Amendment precluded jurisdiction of a federal court, there couldn't be prosecution in any forum whatsoever. Now, that could have actually been the outcome in the case of Ahmed Warsame, an accused member of the terrorist group Al-Shabaab. He was indicted in federal court earlier this year on charges of providing material support to Al-Shabaab and Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. In the Warsame case, our national security and legal teams determined that the federal courts provided the best forum in which to prosecute Warsame for his alleged crimes. Now, this decision was reached for two reasons. One, Warsame is alleged to have violated a number of federal statutes, including sections of the Criminal Code prohibiting trafficking in explosives, use of dangerous weapons, acts of international terrorism, providing material support to foreign terrorist organizations, and receiving military-type training from foreign terrorist organizations. Only the federal courts have jurisdiction to try violations of those sections. Those offenses are not listed as crimes under the Military Commissions Act. Now, there's a second reason why it was decided that Warsame was best prosecuted in a federal court, which could not happen under the amendment of Senator Ayotte. Warsame appears to have engaged in acts of terrorism and material support to terrorism, both of which are crimes under the Military Commissions Act. But, and this is the problem, only if they are committed, quote, in the context of and associated with hostilities, close quote, against the United States. The administration concluded that it would have been difficult to prove beyond a reasonable doubt before a military commission that Warsame met those jurisdictional thresholds. As a result, if the Ayotte Amendment were law, it might be impossible for the United States to prosecute Warsame in any forum. Our federal prosecutors have a proven track record of prosecuting terrorists in federal courts. 2 years ago, the Justice Department informed us that there were 208 inmates in federal prisons who had been sentenced for crimes relating to international terrorism, and an additional 139 inmates who had been sentenced for crimes related to domestic terrorism. Those were crimes which were prosecuted in federal courts. By contrast, only 4 enemy combatants had been convicted by military commissions since 9/11. 2 of them, by the way, as a result of plea agreements sending them to Australia and to Canada. Critics of the decision to try Warsame in federal court apparently would prefer that he be tried before a military commission, even though he might be less likely to be convicted there due to the jurisdictional issues. The most appropriate forum for trial should be determined as it was in Warsame, on the basis of the nature of the offense, the nature of the evidence, and the likelihood of successful prosecution. The executive branch officials who make these determinations are more likely to reach a sound conclusion after weighing those factors than would be the result of a one-size-fits-all legislative restriction that we would impose under the Ayotte Amendment. Yesterday afternoon, Madam President, we received a letter from the Secretary of Defense and the Attorney General expressing their, quote, strong opposition to the Ayotte Amendment. The letter states as follows: whether a given case should be tried in an Article III court or before a military commission is a decision that should be based on the facts and circumstances of the case and the overall national security interests of the United States. It is a decision best left in the hands of experienced national security professionals. And the letter continues: if we are to safeguard the American people, we must be in a position to employ every lawful instrument of national power, including both courts and military commissions, to ensure that terrorists are brought to justice and can no longer threaten American lives. By depriving us, they concluded, of one of our most potent weapons in the fight against terrorism, the amendment would make it more likely that terrorists will escape justice and innocent lives will be put at risk. And, Madam President, I would ask unanimous consent that the text of the letter be included in the congressional record immediately following my remarks.
Without objection.
Madam President, this issue, as the presiding officer may remember, came up in the Armed Services Committee during our markup of the Defense Authorization Bill. Our bill expressly allows the transfer of detainees for trial by a court or competent tribunal having lawful jurisdiction. And Senator Ayotte's amendment to delete that authority was defeated in the Armed Services Committee by a vote of 19-7. The bottom line is that Congress has never before attempted to prevent the prosecution of terrorists in federal court. We should not do so now. We should continue to use military commissions in cases where they are the best place for prosecution and for trial. We should not foreclose prosecution and trial in federal courts. Madam President, I yield the floor.
Senator from Massachusetts.
Thank you, Madam President. I rise to speak today as if in morning business for about 5 minutes.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam President. I rise to speak in strong support of a bill that we'll be voting on, I hope, later today, Senate 1726, the Withholding Tax Relief Act of 2011, which has over 30 co-sponsors. You are one of them, Madam President, and many others. It's based on legislation that I've introduced on 3 separate occasions, which currently has almost 1/3 of the entire Senate co-sponsoring it. And as I said, I've brought it up before, and I'm glad that it will finally be getting a vote, because this is exactly the type of bipartisan jobs bill that the American people are yearning for, and we should be focusing on. And I'm glad we're finally able to bring the repeal of this job-killing tax provision to the floor for a serious vote. This is a jobs bill, plain and simple. I don't know how else you can phrase it. Section 3402 sub T of the tax code will require, beginning in January of 13, federal, state, and local governments to withhold 3% of nearly all contract payments made to private companies, as well as Medicare payments, construction payments, and certain loan payments. This is an arbitrary tax that is extremely expensive to implement and punishes the many for the bad acts of the few. What's more is that this tax absolutely promises to kill jobs at a time when we absolutely cannot afford to kill any jobs. The Government Withholding Relief Coalition, a coalition of more than 100 members, and I have a sheet here, Madam President, of 4 pages of groups: American Bankers Association, Americans for Tax Reform, National Association of Manufacturers, Wholesalers, National League of Cities, Chambers of Commerce, 4 pages of groups and entities, over 100 members, cross-section of America. They have estimated that a combined 5-year total cost to the states and federal government in implementing this legislation could be high as $75 billion. The Department of Defense alone has estimated that this provision could cost the DOD around $17 billion. And I know the Chairman Levin, who spoke before me, we're wrestling with trying to reinstate, I think, $20 to $25 billion from what the appropriations folks cut. So that's real money. Now, here's the catch. The provision is estimated to bring in only around $8 billion. during that same period. And I'm not sure about you, Madam President, but you have the cost of approximately $75 billion, the cost to states and federal government of implementing legislation, and then the DOD, it's $17 billion, yet we're only going to get $8 billion in return. Now, I don't know how else to say it, except only on Capitol Hill does something like that make sense, where we're spending more than we're actually going to be getting. Unfortunately, there are many other reasons why this provision should be repealed as soon as possible, a time when the state and local governments are under extreme financial stress. Why would we want to enforce another unfunded, costly mandate on them to recover minimal funds for the Federal Treasury? It makes no sense. And as I said before, only in Washington does spending $2 in order to recoup $1 make any sense. And I'm encouraged by many of the co-sponsors. As I said, we have, it's a bipartisan group. At what point do you see Al Franken, Senator Franken and Senator Paul on the same bill together, and everybody in between as well? Now, I'm concerned, like many others, that businesses that contract with the government will simply pass on the cost of this provision to the government in form of higher bids on projects. I'm also concerned with the effects on small businesses as well. Senator Snowe, recently the ranking members, you know, of the Small Business Committee on which I serve, and my fellow co-sponsor on my original bill, recognized early on with me that this provision has destructive consequences for small businesses. Everybody here knows it. At what point do we put politics aside and just agree to pass something that is so simple and makes absolutely no sense at all? Because, as you know, it'll restrict cash flow and discourage small businesses from participating in federal contracting. And members of the construction industry are equally as worried. And as you know, that's an industry that is being devastated. So they're equally as concerned that it will tax away all of their anticipated profit on government projects, thus diminishing competition and further raising costs to the government. There is a reason it has been delayed over and over since 2005. Everyone knows it can never go into effect because it will place an extraordinary cost burdens on the federal government and state and local governments as well, and we can't afford to shoulder that burden right now. Everyone agrees. Once again, the 30 co-sponsors on the original bill represent a diverse cross-section. The President proposed its delay in his most recent jobs package. Now, I've said before, why don't we work on the things that we can all agree on right now? Why don't we just take the things that, in a bipartisan, bicameral manner, and get them out the door? Well, I understand the House is working on this. We're doing it right now. It's a small piece. It's a small step, but let's get it right out the door. No reason why we shouldn't be able to do it. And just last week, I had an opportunity to speak before the Small Business Committee with Secretary Geithner, who's issued the provision's latest delay in May about the importance of fully repealing this provision. And this repeal is one of those rare opportunities that we have around here where everyone can be on the same team. Very similar, Madam President, than when we passed the Arlington Cemetery bill with your leadership. In the middle of all the problems we were having last year, you know, the legislative bodies of both branches came together and passed the Arlington Cemetery bill. Well, I look at this as a similar provision where we can actually do something in a bipartisan, bicameral manner and get it passed. And I urge my colleagues to rise above the partisan politics and support this truly bipartisan piece of legislation. Because, as I've said before, Madam President, you know, we're Americans first. Yeah, we're Americans first. And to me, that means it shouldn't matter if this is a Republican bill or a Democrat bill. It matters that, you know, it's a bill that's going to help small businesses and Americans who are fighting on a daily basis to just make ends meet. And we have a great opportunity today to move forward on a piece of jobs legislation and pass this portion of the bill that is in fact supported by the President and scheduled, as I said, to be taken up in the House next week. So I offer my complete support for the bill and appreciate the leader for bringing it to the floor for a vote. I thank the chair and I yield the floor.
President.
Senator from North Dakota.
Thank you, Madam President. I rise to speak on the issue of job creation as well, specifically in regard to legislation that I will be introducing that seeks to not only create jobs but also to truly reduce the cost of electricity to Americans throughout this country. In North Dakota, we have a power plant north of our state capital, city of Bismarck. It's a large power plant. It's about 1,100 megawatts. It consists of two separate plants, each of them 550 megawatts, so that the complex provides 1,100 megawatts of electricity power that fuels our state, as well as sending power to Minnesota, other places as well. This plant uses the latest in emission control technology, state-of-the-art. We also have an ethanol plant attached to the power plant so that the waste steam that comes off the power plant is used to power the ethanol plant to make low-cost transportation fuel as well. And in addition to those things, another innovation at this plant is that they take the coal ash. After they produce the electricity, they take hundreds of thousands of tons of coal ash, and rather than landfilling it, they actually reuse it. And they use it to make concrete. They call it flexcrete for highways. They use it in building materials. They even use it in products like shingles that we use on our roof. Formerly, this plant paid about $4 million a year to landfill that coal ash. Now they sell it for all these products and generate about $12 million a year in revenue. So if you take the $4 million they used to expend to landfill the material, figure in the $12 million they now make selling the product, that's a $16 million revenue benefit to the plant. That means $16 million reduction in the cost of electricity to their customers throughout North Dakota and Minnesota. And at the same time, because they've partnered with a company out of Utah called Headwaters, right there at the complex they also have a facility that manufactures these building products, flexcrete, and creates good-paying jobs as well. So today, Madam President, I rise to introduce common sense bipartisan legislation, a jobs bill, if you will, the Coal Residuals Reuse and Management Act. In fact, this legislation has already passed the House of Representatives with a large bipartisan majority. In a true example of American ingenuity and innovation, entrepreneurs around the country are recycling coal ash. Millions of Americans now work in buildings that are either partially constructed from coal ash strengthened building materials, or they drive home from work on roads and over bridges that are made of coal ash concrete, or as they say, they live under roofs that are shingled, and those shingles are made out of this coal residuals material. In fact, in my home state of North Dakota, we've got both our Heritage Center, which is under construction now, and also the National Energy Center of Excellence, which were constructed with these materials. Here, first, this National Energy Center of Excellence. This is at Bismarck State College. They specialize in energy programs. This facility overlooks the Missouri River. All in, it's about a $20+ million facility. It's absolutely beautiful, and it's made with these coal residual building materials. This other slide, right now, this facility is under construction. This will be a more than $50 million facility, which is in essence a museum and a heritage center for the state of North Dakota. The building materials in this facility, state-of-the-art facility that will have both static and interactive displays, is being built with what's called coal ash, but coal residual materials. So these are materials coming out of our power plants that were formerly simply landfilled, and now we're using them for all these purposes. But the important point is we need to be able to continue to do that. And that's exactly why I'm introducing this legislation. It turns out that using this natural byproduct of coal combustion not only makes our buildings and infrastructure stronger, it makes homes, businesses, and highways more affordable to build. And it also creates hundreds of thousands of jobs in the process while using this cost-effective material. Meanwhile, by using coal ash in such an innovative manner, it's estimated that the overall energy consumption in this country can be reduced by 162 trillion BTUs, British thermal units, and that water usage is reduced annually by 32 billion gallons a year. That's the equivalent of the amount of energy used by 1.7 million homes a year, and the amount of water, actually one-third of the amount of water used in the entire state of California each year. So you can see from a conservation standpoint what an incredible impact using these materials has. Unfortunately, the EPA is now considering whether to overturn 30 years of precedent and regulate coal ash as a hazardous material, despite findings from the Department of Energy, the Federal Highway Administration, and state regulatory agencies throughout the country, as well as EPA itself, EPA's own studies that show that the toxicity level in coal ash is well below the criteria that requires any type of hazardous waste designation. In fact, the EPA's May 2000 regulatory determination, in that determination, they concluded that coal ash does not warrant regulation as hazardous waste, and that doing so would be environmentally counterproductive. However, new regulations first proposed in June of 2010 would create a stigma for coal ash recycling and expose it to frivolous lawsuits that could undermine the industry, cost thousands of jobs, and take billions of dollars out of our economy at a time when working families can least afford it. But the damage to Americans' pocketbooks would not just stop with the undermining of this recycling industry. It's estimated that meeting the regulatory disposal requirements under the EPA's Subtitle C proposal would cost between $250 and $450 per ton, as opposed to about $100 per ton under the current system. That could mean up to another $50 billion in cost, a burden on our electricity generators that use coal, and most importantly, customers, American families, businesses, farmers, again, Americans throughout this great country. It is also estimated that this regulation by EPA, this proposal, could mean the loss of more than 300,000 American jobs. And that is why I have at the desk the Coal Residuals Reuse and Management Act, which I am introducing today along with Senators Kent Conrad, Senator Michael Enzi, Senator Mary Landrieu, Senator Rob Portman, Senator Ben Nelson, Senator Joe Nelson, and also Senator John Bozeman. 4 Republicans and 4 Democrats. This is truly a bipartisan piece of legislation. As I said, it is a companion to House Resolution 2273 that passed the U.S. House of Representatives last Friday with strong, and I emphasize strong, bipartisan support. And it takes a common-sense approach to ensuring that we can continue this vital industry and, in fact, build it, save millions of dollars for American consumers, and create hundreds of thousands of jobs. This bill not only preserves coal ash recycling by preventing these byproducts from being treated as hazardous, it also establishes federal standards for coal ash disposal. Under this legislation, states can set up their own permitting programs for the management and disposal of coal ash. These programs would be required to be based on existing EPA regulations to protect human health and the environment. If a state does not implement an acceptable permit program, then the EPA regulates the program for that state. Importantly, states will know where they stand under this bill, since the benchmark for what constitutes a successful state program is set in statute. EPA can say, yes, the state does meet these standards, or no, it doesn't. But EPA cannot move the goalpost. This is a states-first approach that provides regulatory certainty. And what is certain is that under this bill, coal ash disposal sites will be required to meet established standards. These include groundwater detection and monitoring, liners, corrective action when environmental damage occurs, structural stability criteria, and the financial assurance and the record-keeping needed to protect the public. Madam President, the Coal Residual Reuse and Management Act is legislation needed to protect jobs and help reduce the cost of home and road construction and electric bills. I want to thank both the Republicans and the Democrats who have taken a leadership role and are joining me in co-sponsoring this legislation. I particularly want to thank my fellow senator from North Dakota, Senator Kent Conrad, and I urge our colleagues to join us and support this important measure. Thank you, Madam President.